We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 83 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swaddling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalists. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. Palace have just completed another great season in the Premier League. It's sunny outside, so things are looking up.
Splendid. Well, we are delighted to be joined today by Howard Cox, who was recently announced as the Reform UK candidate to take on Sadiq Khan in next year's election to be the Mayor of London. Howard, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, it's nice to be here, and I'm also a Crystal Palace fan.
Oh, fantastic!
Oh well, we'll just stop the podcast now, and you can all have a chat about that. Excellent. Well, we'll do a different podcast about Palace on another day. But obviously today we're here to talk about your announcement as being the Reform UK candidate for the Mayor of London election next year.
Yeah, sure. So, Howard, thanks. As Dan says, thanks for joining us. First of all, maybe if we could ask you to tell us a bit about yourself, introduce yourself to our listeners.
My name's Howard Cox. I'm 68 years of age, and I've been campaigning for the last 13 years to reduce the cost of filling up at the pumps. It's a long story about in 2010, in the time of when George Osborne was a Chancellor and David Cameron became Prime Minister. I was doing some consultancy work for a lot of small businesses, and one particular business was a big haulage company. I had about 50 trucks. And during our discussions with the managing director, I was sitting there having a cup of tea with him, and he showed me some of his profit and loss and balance sheets. And I noticed one big line that stood out, and that was the cost of fuel. If something like 46% of the cost of that business was fuel, of which 70% went at that time in tax to the government. And we said, this is ridiculous. I mean, why is that? And we were, and to some extent still are, the most highly taxed drivers in the world. And I said, we've got to do something about this. And because Gordon Brown had just left the government, he's beaten by David Cameron, and the Conservatives still had plans to introduce a thing called a fuel price escalator, whereby every budget and spring and autumn statement, whatever you call them these days, there was going to be an increase in the price of fuel duty that went up with inflation plus 2 or 3 pence. If that had happened and they continued that process, if you extrapolate it, the price of diesel and petrol would be over £3 now. And that is a serious point. It probably wouldn't have been £3, but it would certainly been 50 to a p to a pound more than it is now. And we put together a campaign. We managed to build up 1.7 million supporters, get the Road Haulage Association, the Freight Transport Association, the RAC to back it. And the rest is history. We've had a freeze in fuel duty in 13 years. And in fact, we had a 5p cut last year by when Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor at the time, cut it by 5p. No one noticed it, I don't think. But and back in March 2011, George Osborne reduced it by a penny instead of it going up by 4p. I know this doesn't sound big, but when you're talking about every time anyone mentions inflation, or anything like that, the news, the BBC, ITV, Sky, or whatever, inflation's gone up or gone down. Invariably, the next line is because of pump prices, whether they've gone up or gone down. And so, I became absolutely passionate about actually helping motorists. And for the last 13 years, that is what I've been doing. And to cut a long story short, I'm now known as the most successful public affairs campaign in terms of in tax history, because this is the longest period any tax has been frozen. So in essence, that's what I've been doing, and that's where I am. And Richard Tice, the head of Reform UK, approached me about 6 months ago to ask me to stand as London Mayor, because he could see that there would be a popular marriage of what I do in terms of actually helping the motorists, and of course trying to scrap ULEZ. which is, as you know, where you are in Croydon, you're going to be hit by the ULEZ expansion. So in essence, that's where we are today.
It's interesting. So you mentioned Richard Tice approached you. Beyond that approach, is there anything particularly attracted you to reform?
For 50 years, I've already voted Tory, I'm also one of these people that actually voted to go into the common market back in 73. So I'm not a great Brexiteer or any of those sorts of things, because reform was born out of the Brexit party. But I have very close friends in the Tory backbenchers, and I've had loads of good people supporting me. About 140 MPs have always supported Fairfield UK, because what I do, I tend to use objective campaigning and use, rather than sticking myself to the road with super glue, I use independent economic advice and analysis, and they're paid a lot of money for that to get the message across to government that if you cut fuel duty, if you lower the price, the cost of filling up, you will actually lower inflation, create jobs, increase GDP, and those are the sort of issues that I managed to convince the government. And I'm really a pain in the backside of most chancellors, but they also at the same time have a begrudging respect for the campaign. Richard Tice approached me, and I had no ambitions. I'm very apolitical, and he just said, "Look, this is what we want to do," and it matched perfectly, because the Tories have moved away from most people in this country in terms of being a low tax party, and it's in and this whole thing with Labour and Sadiq Khan in London, who really, quite honestly, is wrecking the city, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But Richard Tice agreed with me that we should scrap all ULEZ, get rid of local traffic neighbourhoods, and improve social housing, and triple the number of bobbies on the beat, and all those sorts of things. With our 1.7 million supporters of Fairfield UK, something like 80% of those agree with those particular aims and objectives. So it was a no-brainer. Richard said, "Look, I will finance it. Reform UK will finance you. We believe you're the best fit to become London Mayor and to ditch Khan."
It's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. That ties in a lot to what we've heard around here. You mentioned ULEZ in Croydon. Obviously, it is a massive issue out here. So it's sort of, even someone that's quite involved with things, it's taken me aback how popular the Anti-ULEZ campaign has been, or how unpopular ULEZ has been. You've touched upon it a bit, but could you just clarify exactly what your position is, what you'd aim to do if elected as Mayor of London?
Yeah, it's a very simple thing. Again, I mentioned that I'm sort of an objective, and I'm the only candidate that's commissioned independent economic evidence to show how much ULEZ, since its introduction, has cost London in terms of GDP and the economic impact on our lives in London. And to cut a long story short, every year ULEZ has cost approaching £1 billion negatively to London, and those sorts of things. But more importantly, these sorts of taxes, just like fuel duty, just like ULEZ, and just like congestion charges and all those sorts of things, it impacts on the poor, low-income families, small businesses, sole traders like plumbers and electricians, etc. It's not just those living in London and living in Croydon, it's people coming into work into London. It's that sort of thing that's impacting, and it's going to really impact totally on people's way of life. And the cost of living crisis at the moment is a major issue that these people cannot afford to keep paying money. And I'll come on to the social bit in a minute. But what my feeling is that ULEZ is a complete and utter noose around most people's necks. Even Transport for London, in their own research, have shown that the expansion of ULEZ will not make any demonstrable difference to the air we breathe, the quality of the air we breathe. And every single driver wants to breathe clean air. Everyone wants to do the best for the planet, etc., all those sorts of things. But you don't do it by hitting people in the pocket or hitting small businesses. And I've got countless messages, like thousands of people, small businesses and midwives who have to do double shifts at St Thomas's Hospital, going up in their little 12-year-old diesel car that they can't afford to buy an electric car, etc. And they're going to have to pay £25 over 2 days, plus the congestion charge and all the other things. They're giving up nursing, giving up midwifery, those sorts of things. And I can't sit by any longer and watch Sadiq Khan ruin London.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's a huge issue. I live somewhere where people might well be half a mile from a bus stop, even up and down hills. It's a relatively small part of of London, but it's no reason why those people should be unjustifiably punished for it. Obviously, as mayor, you're not just responsible for things like ULEZ. There's policing and many other transport areas. What is your feeling about how Mayor Khan currently deals with policing in London, and what might you look to do differently?
Well, again, this is going to be a marathon. It's 12 months away, the actual election, and we're going to be building up a manifesto. But the headlines so far, in terms of what I'm standing for, is that, and this is a very, very troubling statistic for me. At any one time in Greater London and London, the number of police on the beat is only 5% of how many police there are. So that means 95% are not on the beat. And I just couldn't believe that. And I've checked it, and we've done some freedom of information requests on this, and apparently it's true. And so what my initial positioning in terms of crime, because and this is another interesting statistic, something like 160 youngsters were knifed to death in the time of Sadiq Khan's tenure. And with only one person actually supposedly dying from poor air quality. And that's a pretty salient comparison. But what we want to do, Reform UK, is to triple the number of bobbies on the beat. We want more visible policing. And obviously the question is, how are we going to afford that? Well, it's simple. We get them out from behind the desk and bring them back on the street. And I've spoken to a countless number of police who really are frustrated with the paperwork, the administration, and the wokery. This is the popular word used of what, looking at internet and what people are abusing people online by saying there's something or whatever, insulting them. And they spend time writing reports about those sorts of issues rather than actually getting into the community, meeting people and finding out what's going in the local areas and who is behind things like knife crime. When you see someone running through the streets with a machete, you got to realise that you're going to run the other way, but we need police that go and stop these people and stop them getting their hands on machete. So in answer to your question, the first stage is to triple the number of bobbies being visibly seen on the beat. And there's the other big issue, of course, is housing, social housing. My daughter, for example, lives on the southeast or the southeast side of Greater London in Orpington, not far from Croydon. She's got quite a good job. She's an HGV truck driver. She drives a 40-ton articulated truck. And she's 32 years of old. She earns about 45 grand a year. You think, oh, great, she's doing well. But she can't afford to buy a house, or the rent she's got is something like £1,400 a month. She could actually, the house she's in that she's renting, she could have a mortgage and it'd be only £700. The whole thing is a mess and that sort of thing. So what we want to try and do under Reform UK is put together a social housing plan, and one of the big things we want to do is to reduce the many planning obstacles which stop builders building on brownfield sites. The brownfield sites are everywhere in Greater London. We're not going to promote the idea of building on the greenfield sites or the green belt, but there is enough brownfield buildings and sites and everything to develop to produce social low-cost housing, and that's the sort of thing I'm going to be standing for. So they're the headlines. So I'm not just a one-trick pony just for motorists.
So next year's elections are going to be under the first past the post system rather than the supplementary vote system, which has been used in previous mayoral elections. So the system where you can potentially, vote for Reform UK as your first choice, but you could then vote for Labour or the Conservatives as your second choice, because usually those are the two parties that get through that first stage. But that's been changed. It's now going to be first past the post, like in general elections. So the Conservatives, I've no doubt, will say that a vote for anybody else other than themselves is going to be a wasted vote and will just help Khan to stay in office. How are you going to counter that argument?
Well, it's an interesting one. I'm going to throw it the other way and you say a vote for the Conservatives is a wasted vote. But they've lost the last two elections and they're not planning to get rid of the whole of ULEZ. I am. They're not planning to get rid of the low traffic neighbourhoods. I am. They're not planning to triple the number of bobbies on the beat. I am. Those are the sorts of issues I'm going to keep campaigning on. I am not going to underestimate the challenge I have. And, most people would say I've got no chance whatsoever. And the first past the post system is obviously going to make it harder for me. But when you've got 130,000 Fairfield UK supporters in Greater London who are all saying they're going to vote for me, and that's another reason, which I didn't say earlier in the interview, that my choice was made up not just because Reform UK have got the same policies that I want to stand on, but I had about 6,000 or 7,000 emails in the space of 2 months asking me to stand against Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan has created such hatred for that man by his single-minded cash-grabbing policies and selfishness. One of the things, of course, is the other thing I'm going to introduce is I'm going to use public consultations for what they should be. I'm going to ask questions of major issues I don't like using the word referendum or referenda, but fundamentally, I'm going to ask people, and if they take part in a public consultation and the majority have actually vote for a particular issue, I will support that issue. What Sadiq Khan did in last year's public consultation for the extension of the ULEZ zone, 2 out of 3 people voted against it, but he's still going ahead with it. And also something like 5,000 Fairfield UK supporters voted also against the expansion. And TfL and Sadiq Khan treated those 5,000 votes as one vote from Fairfield UK. It's disgusting. How he thinks he's full of untruths. I won't use the 4-letter word beginning with L, but he is truly a dishonourable, dishonest politician, and his time has got to go. I will stand on sensible, common sense policies, and I will listen to people and support them. I'm not a political animal. I simply want to get common sense and London moving again. And that means right across Greater London, and to encourage people to come to London because it's such a great city. At the moment, people are scared to come in. I drove home the other night from an interview with Talk TV about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'd finished the interview process. And I drove through places like New Cross and Old Kent Road, places because I was born in Lewisham. So I know the area very well. And I always loved going through those areas. I didn't recognise it. It was full of, there was people all over the street, drunk. There were fights going on, all those sorts of things. This is not the London that we need. We need to get London back to where it was and be a proud capital city. And the first past the post approach is going to make it difficult. But I think what I'm hearing so far, people resonate with what I'm trying to do. And the Conservatives, despite them being good friends of mine, I no doubt they will approach me and ask me to stand down, but I'm going to approach them and ask them to stand down. And I'm quite happy to make people like someone like Susan Hall or Keith Prince or Sean Bailey, or whoever's standing, Paul Scully, etc. I'm quite happy to make them a deputy mayor.
Well, certainly you've got yourself out there ahead of them. They are currently going through the selection process. So we'll see who they do come out with. But yeah, no, it's good to see you getting out there in advance. Now, obviously, you said you're quite new to Reform UK, and of course, Reform UK in its own way is quite new, albeit it developed from the Brexit Party. Labour, Conservatives, and to a lesser extent, the Lib Dems and the Greens all have a network of campaigners across London, certainly, and so they have an advantage over other parties because they have those feet on the ground. And without giving away too many secrets, how are you planning to campaign across the whole of London?
Well, it's not a case of a secret process. It's just common sense. It's the Reform UK is rapidly growing. They've got across the UK, various YouGov polls and other polls, they've got about 9% of the popular vote. So they have that, and in most places that's more than the Lib Dems and more than the Greens. They deliberately didn't make a big effort in the local elections because they want to focus on building up a good base of MPs, and they're standing in every single constituency across the UK to get as many MPs as they can in Parliament. You've got to remember one of the hard things about poor old Nigel Farage when he was doing his thing, he got 4 million votes, but only 1 MP. Our system isn't right for the majority of people. It's a bit like the public consultation of Sadiq Khan. It's 2 out of 3 said no, they don't want the ULEZ extension, but one single man has the power to say no to that. And of course, in July we got a judicial review, which I helped succeed, and I think I might be talking at that as well, being as a witness, to actually try and find out whether that it's legally the TfL and Sadiq Khan are legally right to introduce this and by ignoring the consultation. So that'd be interesting time. In terms of the people, how I'm going to campaign, it's very, very simple. There are loads of people across Greater London. And as I said to you earlier, there's about 100 to 150,000 supporters of Fairfield UK across Greater London. If they can talk to 2 or 3 people, each of those, we can spread the word. And one of the clever things we did, I was one of the pioneers of the original social media back in 2010 when we were the first to get an e-petition. If you remember rightly, David Cameron introduced the e-petition process, whereby if you've got 100,000 people signing up to the e-petition, you'll get a debate on the floor of the House of Commons. So we're quite good at mobilising people, etc., in terms of actually the social media side of things. And I'm going to be out as much as I possibly can. I'm going to go do a lot of hustings, do a lot of presenting. I'm happy to come to anyone you want. If you speak to people, if you want me to come and talk to them about what I'm offering, please pass my name. I will go everywhere. I'm really going to go for this for the next year. And as I say, I'm under no illusion it's going to be a tough task, but I'm being encouraged every day. And yesterday or day before on Saturday, I was at London Bridge at an Anti-ULEZ rally, and I was absolutely touched quite emotionally by a number of people wanting to come out and have selfies with me and all this sort of thing to say, we support you. We're going to go simply because I'm standing on very common sense policies. It's a no-brainer. If anyone wants to talk to me about gender, sex and all those sorts of things, I'll just say, look, that's a private matter. I'm not interested. All I care about is London moving again, and I promise you that's the focus I'm going to be. And you won't hear me rubbishing anyone else. I'll just focus on the issues.
Well, you've got your campaign underway now. How can people get involved?
The important thing to do is to actually go on social media, go find Howard C. Cox on Twitter. And it's also Vote for Cox. I think there is one on there that, and there's the website is Vote for Cox, and just join up and support us. Obviously, we do need funding. Reform UK is not a rich party. Most of the Reform UK is funded by 2 or 3 people, led by Richard Tice. But it's going to, as I said, I'm going to say again, I'm under no illusion it's going to be a tough task, but please, contact, and also please sign up to Fairfield UK, which is my campaign. I'm still running by the side of it. I'm still fighting to make sure fuel duty doesn't go up, and I'm fighting for Pump Watch, which is a body which we're to actually for consumers, a consumer price regulatory body, to stop the opportunistic profiteering at the pumps. So there's lots of ways to get hold of me, and for people getting just contact me, email me, direct message me on Twitter, etc., and I will talk to you and get involved with you. But above all, chuck in a tenner to try and help us get rid of Sadiq Khan.
Well, thank you very much for that, Howard. It's been interesting to speak with you, and we'll be watching your campaign very closely.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
So, Mike, what have we got on our website at the moment?
Yeah, a couple of new articles. One, firstly, very sort of Croydon focused. Looking at the spending of Croydon Council, and particularly on spending on the London Borough of Culture. There was £500,000 spent last year, and another almost £500,000 due to be spent this year, and millions more of other taxpayers' money from our bankrupt council on us being the London Borough of Culture. Much of it's being recycled to the same institutions that the Labour Council that drove us to bankruptcy was spending money on. I'm not impressed. Have a look and see what you think. Also got an article about giving thanks to the Industrial Revolution. Following a visit recently to the Black Country Living Museum, a fantastic place to go to, I was rather struck by how much they seem to put a downer on the Industrial Revolution, the thing that's responsible for all of the great standard of living we get to enjoy today that millennia of people have not before. Really want to give thanks to it. So, mate, if you get a chance, have a read and let me know what you think.
And we've got an upcoming event as well.
Absolutely. Wednesday, June the 21st. If you're around in Croydon, get down to the George from 7 p.m. That's Wednesday, June the 21st for our usual third Wednesday drinks.
Well, if you'd like to write for our website or have any stories you'd like us to cover, please do contact us. You can do so via the Twitter at Croydon Const, via our Facebook page, via our website, croydonconstitutionalists.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalists@gmail.com. well, do please subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Do please like, share, and leave a review. It's always good to get feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. Well, thank you once again to Howard for joining us, and thank you all for listening. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Stay free, everybody.